free to interrupt if you have questions, but there's the link to the slide deck, and I'm going to put it in the chat box too. In case anybody needs it, but when I advance slides. We are recording. So good morning, everybody. My name is Nikki Vredenberg, and I work at Montana PBS, which is in Bozeman, Montana. My role there is the Director of Education. I stepped into this role about just over 3 years ago after being in the classroom for about 16 years. I was a primary teacher, teaching mostly K-1 for most of my career at a very rural school just east of Bozeman. When I was teaching in K-1, I had one-to-one iPads in my classroom the last few years. I did have a year in 4th and 5th grade, and we had Chromebooks in that classroom. I really love digital learning and using technology to get kids to create, and that really has inspired me to step into this role at Montana PBS, where I offer professional development for teachers to use technology and to expand their media literacy. I work mostly with rural schools as a digital learning specialist, and I do everything from model lessons to host after-school groups. I think those of you in Billings probably know about the TILT program. I totally stole that idea from Tracy and Shelley and Sarah and developed my own version of TILT in Livingston and in Three Forks, and so I also lead those kinds of groups. This session came about from the crazy time that we just got done with the learning at home. And I had a lot of teachers and parents and administrators asking about digital communication and wanting to really talk about what are the tools that schools can use to keep parents in the loop. And so I put this session together in 4 parts so we can talk about what tools are available, how do we compare the tools, how do we make decisions about it, and then once we know which tools are best, putting together a plan for communication that is transparent and something that families and teachers and administrators can rely on. And then I want to talk a little bit about how we'll continue to support families to use digital tools as time goes on. So those are the 4 parts to this session. I lost my control here. Where am I? So I put this together by gathering some feedback from teachers and from parents, and just had some informal interviews with parents that I worked with in my office and teachers, people that I knew, and just anybody I could talk to, and just asked that open-ended question, you know, how did home learning go? You know, what was distance learning like? You just made history. What did you learn? Specifically talking about communication, and some of the 3 main themes that came out of those interviews was that communication was really a struggle. Everybody felt that way, teachers, parents, principals. Some people were hard to reach. Some parents didn't know that juggling multiple teachers with different styles and different communication plans and different tools. Some teachers were frustrated they couldn't reach some families, and they had a little bit too much communication with other families, that it was just always a juggling act. Feedback came up that they heard from some teachers regularly when kids turned in assignments, but not from others, and so that inconsistency was hard. And then just the overall consistency, the need for a routine, the need for a schedule. And nobody was critical during these conversations. Everybody understood that what we just did was historic. It was an emergency situation. There wasn't any blame placing. It was just, gosh, these were the things that frustrated us. So this is where I took this information, and I put together this session. And it's not really meant to recommend one platform or the other. It's just meant to help teachers and administrators reflect on the tools that they might use to communicate with families, and maybe go back to their buildings and have a conversation about how to best streamline a couple of tools. Look at the chat box. Terry said, you found yourself needing multiple communication platforms because parents opted, some others. Very stressful, absolutely. And I think that's the hardest part. If there was one tool that everybody used and could access, communication would not be an issue. But the fact is, they bring their own expertise and their own experience into how they want to communicate, and we're left trying to meet them halfway. So yeah, absolutely. To my next slide here. Oh, I just jumped a bunch of them. Here we go. Boy, okay. So I kind of grabbed all the ways we communicate. And when you think about it, it's somewhat staggering. All the different ways that we reach out to and communicate with parents. We have social media, we have email, we have newsletters, texting platforms, websites, blogs and portfolios, learning management system. And I bet everybody here is doing all or almost all of these things, which is almost a full-time job. I mean, you might look at this and think, I need a secretary just to manage all of my digital communication platforms. I've listed some of the platforms that teachers use to do some of these things, and you can direct link those right from the slide deck. And I'm not going to talk about specific platforms, but these are the ones that I saw teachers use the most, or they're the ones that I used myself. So if you're looking for some platforms, or you're looking for a new way to communicate, you might consider one of these. Then I went and grouped all of those into the purpose. So what kind of information do we share in email? What kind of information should go out on social media? And so I look at it as, an email is often that parent-teacher one-to-one. For a lot of us, that's the best way to communicate with a parent about their specific child. Most parents will answer emails and respond to us by emails. It's also a great way to share those announcements, to do some recognition and some reminders. You'll notice that in every category, recognition and reminders fits into every category, which means there is some opportunity for getting one tool or a couple of tools to perform multiple functions. And so I just put this out here to really think about, like, what does my classroom website do? What do people get from my classroom website? I know a lot of teachers that have opted out of having a classroom website. They've put a lot of work into it. They keep it updated, but the feedback they're getting is no one's looking at it. And so if no one's looking at it, it's not really worth the time or energy to have it there anymore. I felt that way about my newsletters when I used to print up a paper newsletter and send it home. But I would get the kinds of questions that told me that they weren't making it home, or they weren't being read. And so sometimes we have to choose a couple of platforms to try and hit everybody and say goodbye to the ones that we're putting time and energy to, but not everybody's listening. Oh, I've got some good comments. During social distancing, I was using at least 6 of those with every parent. It was exhausting. Days were 5:30 a.m. to 11. Oh my goodness. Sandra, is that how you say that? That is, oh my goodness. That's so much. So hopefully our discussion today will help you figure out how to maybe streamline some of that. And I think some of what was so challenging is it was so sudden that we didn't have time to put together a communication plan and share it with families so that they would know what to expect. We just went home and started working and sort of developed the communication tools on the fly, build the airplane while you're flying it, sort of thing. And that's the communication part is so exhausting. What I've also talked to parents about is that, if you have multiple kids in one building and every teacher has a different system, and every teacher is using a different platform, for a parent managing multiple platforms was exhausting as well. One child is getting things through Class Dojo, and another child is getting things through Bloom, and another child is just getting things through email. Keeping up with all of that, especially for parents that weren't didn't have a lot of digital literacy or not a lot of confidence using those tools, it was really hard. So this is where I've really urged schools to take a hard look at this list and say to themselves, you know, if we were to choose a couple of these, what would they be? And really focus in on, if we're going to use a texting platform, let's get everybody in the school to use the same one. You know, if we like Remind, let's make sure every teacher is using Remind. If we like social media, if that's where our audience is and that's where our announcements should go out, we'll just rely on social media and we won't bother with a newsletter. So kind of making those hard decisions and doing it for like the good of the group, so that at the beginning of the year, we can go to our families and say, this is how the school will communicate with you. These are the tools we'll use. This is how to use them. This is our plan. I want to go back to the previous slide here. I want you to notice that there are some tools that are on many of these lists. So you can do a lot of things with one tool. Seesaw is one of them. So if you're using Seesaw with your kids already, you can use Seesaw and the announcements feature in Seesaw to send a newsletter, to send a quick parent to teacher message, to post student work and have it as a portfolio, and as sort of a learning management system to send assignments and activities. So there you have that one tool that can be used for all that important communication, and it's so much easier for parents to manage. And you can just say, just make it a Seesaw, make sure the Seesaw app is updated and current. Everything you need will come through Seesaw. And then the school can have, you know, Infinite Campus, a lot of schools send things out for that. They can have social media to share announcements. You'll probably still use email. I wish we could get away from email, but we just can't. It's just too important to have some of those conversations, longer conversations. A couple I didn't put on here that I thought of this morning as I was preparing. I used to print stickers and stick them to my kids and send them home that said things like, ask me about my field trip permission slip form, you know, things like that. Or when I wanted to get logged into Seesaw, I had parents put stickers on their chests that said, you know, get my Seesaw form out of my backpack or something like that. So I didn't put that on there. And I do think there's value in paper too, sending paper home. Sometimes that's the best way to communicate with people. So I really do need to add that. I love Seesaw too, and Seesaw for School, you can continue using it throughout the grade levels. And I think that's amazing because then we can see that work go from kindergarten to all the way through the grades. I agree with you. So of course, the best one is the one parents will use. And as we said before, that's a gamble as to which one will be the one that they'll use. So it's important to have a couple and to really try to manage those deliberately. So now I would love everybody to type in this slide. And so you all should have a copy of this deck and you should all be able to edit it. And if not, put something in the chat box and I'll fix that. Just click into the slide, and I'm gonna go out of present mode here. At least I'm gonna try. And type the tool that you think is best or most effective into the box. And so we'll have some of that awkwardness with working in the same slide, but I think we'll get through it. And then as you can see, I've got these little stars in the corner here that I meant for you to drag into the square. So if somebody's already typed in Seesaw, so if you want to just drag a star into that Seesaw box to let us know that you're also using Seesaw, you can go ahead and do that. And we'll give everybody a chance to type in any of the tools they're using for communication. And don't be afraid to, also the phone, I didn't mention the phone, calling people on the phone. That's a great way to communicate and something I think that it has a touch that just other tools don't. Good, we got Class Tag, Calling Parents, Remind, Moodle. I will admit that I don't know a lot about Moodle, and I have learned more about it at this conference than I ever had. So I'm interested if there is a parent communication tool in Moodle. I imagine there is, because it seems like a pretty robust learning management platform. Google Classroom, absolutely. Texting parents with a Google Voice number. I just listened to a podcast with that strategy. That is really cool. If we run out of stars, feel free to copy and paste and make some new ones. That is very cool. Class tag, calling parents, Google Classroom. I like watching the slide populate in front of me. Lots of stars on Seesaw. I'm glad we have, I think there's probably a connection between all of the Billings teachers and the users of Seesaw in this room, I'm guessing, right? Because I know Tracy is like a rock star Seesaw ambassador, certified teacher, and she's done a great job helping you all get that going in your classrooms. Yes, awesome. Class Dojo is on there. Yep, my daughter's teacher used Class Dojo one year, and I really enjoyed having that as a way of seeing into the classroom. So that's an excellent tool. All right, so Anne, I guess I should mention the next activity. It would be hard for me to be able to see. I can't really see who's doing what on this slide. But for the next activity, I am going to give everybody Moot Coin for participating. On the next slide, I've created a Padlet wall, and you can click onto the Padlet wall right there in this slide. And here's where we're going to weigh the pros and cons of some of these tools. So I'd like to hear what you like about some of these tools and what you don't like about some of these tools, what you wished was different about them. So go ahead and click on that link and go to the Padlet wall. And you'll see I've listed some tools up there, and feel free to add some that I may not have added there. And type your name next to that because that tells me who to give Moot Coin to after we finish. I'm gonna come over here. Oh, we've already got it going. So here's our Padlet wall. So add your name and then tell me what is great about these tools, but also what you wish could be different. Character limits, that's come up a lot with Remind. In some cases, people think that's an advantage because it helps you keep it short and sweet, and people are more likely to read short messages. There we go. Some Class Dojo. Okay, so there's no direct parent contact in Class Dojo. I had trouble keeping up with it. It wasn't intentional enough. I like that. Interesting comment. I use the dual messaging system. Character limits. Photos were not as easy in Remind. Seesaw allows cooperating teacher, great interactions with parents. Feel free to give each other, click the heart button too if you want to like each other's comments or leave each other comments about some of the things that you're talking about. The digital journal, parent communication, student work portfolio. I will say with Seesaw, the Seesaw for Schools makes it a really robust communication tool. If your district is paying that yearly cost per student, that's where you get the best features of parent communication. It is frustrating that you don't get them unless you pay. But anymore, districts are budgeting for these kinds of things, and so it's probably not a heavy lift for a lot of districts to apply for this. You can do so much. Some of the parents had a hard time getting Seesaw downloaded on their devices, and it was also difficult to actually try to download it. I think they were just overwhelmed, absolutely. And depending on internet speeds and what device they're using, and what their data plans are like, those are the things we can't control, and we can offer only a tiny bit of assistance with. I always say I can help you teach with technology, but I don't know how to fix the internet, and that's sometimes the downside. Terry says the downside was our resource teacher didn't, so I had to get in touch with some kids in alternate ways. Okay. And that's the thing, if there's that consistency doesn't exist, then the tool falls down a little bit. Michael says free s'mores and s'more newsletter. If only.
Yeah.
I don't have.
I'd never used Padlet before, so I needed to
Yeah,
create at least
yeah,
one
play
comment.
with it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, s'mores. I wish that s'mores came with s'mores. Make it a great reason to use it. Great, there's some great comments. Thanks so much for putting all of those comments on there. And after this session is done, I will go through and give you all Moot coin for participating. Feel free to continue talking and sharing on that Padlet. I'm going to go back to, I'm having some, there we go. Go back to my slides here. Maybe. So the other thing that after you've sort of decided your tools, or I think as you're deciding which tools to use, you need to also, or we need to also be getting an idea of what works for our parents and what kinds of tools are appropriate for which families. And so I think a lot of schools and teachers already do this. They already send some kind of a survey out at the beginning of the school year. And to gauge, how did parents want to communicate? What is that social media comfort? What is the desired communication? And then followed with, some information about your child. I think most teachers incorporate this kind of thing, whether it's digital or paper version. I think for me, this was always I was always trying to get a feel for who I could contact digitally, and then getting that short list of the people that absolutely needed paper copies of things sent home, or the ones that I would probably just have to go wait in the pickup line and talk to if it was really important. But what I always found is the majority of people liked either a text or an email. And anymore, I'm finding texting to be a real preference, because we just always have our phones and we just are naturally getting those notifications. And so choosing a texting platform or using Seesaw to send parent communication really does support parents to get the communication when they need it. So then the next piece, and I thought we could just have some conversation in the chat box for this part. And that is, it's one thing to choose your plan. It's another thing, and to choose your tools and to share your tools and to tell your school, this is what we're doing. But then we really do need to help families use these tools. We need to provide some kind of an orientation so that they know what the tools are and how to use them. And then ongoing support should be provided throughout the school year to help them continue to use those things. And this is a part I'd love to hear your ideas. What do you have in mind? If Seesaw is your chosen tool, what are you going to do when school starts to help families learn to use Seesaw? And then what kind of support is available to families if they need help? So go ahead and write some answers in the chat box. And again, I'll go through and offer Moot coin to people who offer up some answers during this part of it. All right, so a parent night where they go to different classrooms and learn the different tools. I love that. Dojo, classroom. Always introduce in a positive way. In the spring, I made several videos walking them through how to use it. Awesome. I think that's nice because they can always come back and watch those when they need them. It's an information and a meet and greet. Show them how it works. A video on Seesaw, right? That's good. So lots of videos. So a lot of in-person as well as digital ways of sharing with people. I see that. I've talked to schools that did want to have a parent night meet and greet, and having sort of textperts on hand to help teachers. FAQ would be very helpful. A virtual parent night, I would love that, especially for those of us juggling. I have 2 kids that will be in 2 different schools next year. Um, and trying to get to both those buildings for open house may not work, and so having the virtual options, having the asynchronous options to watch videos and things would be really helpful. Calling to assist, yep, absolutely. I think we might spending a lot more time on the phone with people, I think, is a good strategy. A Zoom walkthrough if needed. Printed directions, but then call families who need some support. I think that's great. I think having lots of those printed directions in the beginning is that we still cling to paper, I think, sometimes when we want to go step by step through things. I also know, and Tracy told me this in Billings, that you had an email that parents could call, or could not call, an email parents could send if they needed tech support and if they were having an issue, and it sort of was a direct line to the IT department to offer support. I thought that was a great idea for offering parents support to use those tools and giving them, sometimes it's just nice to, if I have questions, this is what I do. And just providing those kinds of supports. And then so you as a classroom teacher aren't having to manage some of the IT things that you maybe don't have the expertise to do. Love the Zoom idea if we have large groups. Yeah, excellent. So we've got some good ideas here. So I see a virtual parent night, having lots of paper directions available. I think in the beginning, it's where we just have to cover all the bases. All the things, all the ways, and making sure that they could find what they need, or they have direct contact to someone who can help them as they're figuring out how to do it. I also think, though, a really powerful teaching tool is our students. When we teach the kids how to use the tools and encourage the kids to go home and teach their parents how to use the tools, that could be a very deliberate assignment, which is tonight I want you to go home and show your mom how to make a Seesaw post, and we're going to make a Seesaw post together. And then as a teacher, I'm going to leave you a comment, and that's how we'll know that you were successful in helping your parents use this tool. I see having siblings to help out. I think older siblings are going to get utilized a lot after this year. They all learned how to use these platforms, and they do need to help each other and work together. If tech is available at home, and make sure they know about mobile options. Yes, I think, when I first started teaching and we were doing that, we talk about safety. We wanted kids to know their phone numbers and how to dial phone numbers, and we bring in like that old phone with a cord and let them practice pushing the button and holding the phone. Well, now we have to do it with our smartphones. I'm holding that up, but you can't see it because of my background. But now we need kids to know how to use smartphones, and so I really think an exercise with kids and parents using mom's phone together so the kid can navigate things, and that might be the device they have at home to use, is just that phone. And so kind of just being realistic about that. A GroupMe text message group, yeah, I've seen that. I think the Google Voice number that someone brought up on another slide is another great one, because they can leave each other voicemail messages too, and that doesn't use your personal information. So I've heard a lot of really interesting ideas around having a Google Voice phone number where people could call and leave messages, or you could do texting and things like that. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to go back through when we're done and write down all of these names, all these great suggestions. Oh, you can send pictures through Google Voice too, and I bet families love it. See, I think such a simple thing, and so many options. I think that's a great idea. I love that one. Okay, so here's another interactive slide. I think we use the chat box for this part, so I'm actually going to skip this one. I forgot I put this slide in here, so we just use the chat box. So the next piece is the communication plan. And so this is the part where I just want you to take a minute and reflect and look at, what are the tools that you're using for one-to-one parent-to-teacher things? What are the tools you're going to use for announcements? What are the tools for giving everybody what your learning goals are and what is the content covered. How are you sharing student work samples? In the notes part of this slide, I've got a Google Docs template. And it's nothing fancy, it's a table. But if you make a copy of it, you can type in and start to create your own version of this is what I'll use to share this is what I'll use to share that. And sometimes it just helps to see it all out on paper. And then you can take that and put it in some kind of a communication with your parents and say, this is our classroom communication plan. This is how you can expect to hear from me. This is the type of information you can expect to get from me. The other thing that I think is important is that coming up with some sort of a schedule for when you plan to use all of this. So my daughter's teacher, when we were doing the Learn at Home, she would email us every Monday, and we could expect that email from her on Monday with the assignments that we were going to have for that week. And then the assignments were always in a Google slide deck, and then she'd post it in the Google Classroom. And so we knew every Monday to check our email, and that's the information that's where we would find the information that we needed. When I was in the classroom, I let my parents know that our classroom website would be updated every Thursday. And that was just because my kids had art on Thursdays and I had more time. And so I just made sure that that was on my to-do list on Thursdays. So giving parents some idea of when to expect certain types of communication can be really helpful. So that's something that you might want to jot on that communication plan, that if you're going to have some kind of a newsletter and you're going to share that in Seesaw, that you'll be sharing that on Friday afternoon or whenever you plan to share that information. So I thought I would just give you a little bit of time in this session and hopefully you've done it a little bit while you're working to jot that out. And then if you'll just share some of that in the chat box with us, you know, what goal do you have? What plans do you have? All right, DC says she's going to use Seesaw for many of these things. All right. Plan to use Seesaw for almost all of it. I'll still use email and phone calls, definitely. Okay, so lots of you are committing to Seesaw for this. That's great. A digital newsletter put in Google Classroom. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think there's still value in a newsletter, and I think there's so much fun things, so many fun ways to create newsletters now with Google Slides and drawing and Canva. I think it's still a great way to get information out and to share what we're doing. Transparent Classroom to share work samples. Interesting, Susan. I don't think I've heard of Transparent Classroom. Digital newsletters as well. Yeah, you're new, so you're going to have to be very diligent to make sure you know the school's communication style along with each individual teacher. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an excellent observation that, you know, I hope that it's possible for conversations at schools to happen about how can everybody use some of the same tools and be on some of the same schedule, but that's, you know, it's hard because everybody's different and everybody's needs and style is different. But getting to know one another and having some conversations, even if we can find some consistency across grade levels, or in teams. Home folders every Thursday school-wide. I think that's great. I think that's something that I had the same thing. I had a home folder. It was red. It had their names on it. It had a place that it lived in the classroom. And that was what parents would look for if there was going to be anything important, was to pull that folder out of the backpack. That's an important part of communication, is something like that, that everyone knows when to expect it, and when to look for it. Oh, Montessori. Okay. Thanks, Susan. That's interesting. So yeah, I don't know a lot about the Montessori world, so that's really cool. There's merit in scheduling that check-in, positive communication too, not just when there's an issue. Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. I agree that I get sort of a panic when the phone rings and it's the school, and I assume somebody's sick or somebody's in trouble, and having just a consistent dialogue that isn't always negative is really important. And in fact, I think that if we can have more positive interactions using our communication tools, the better, where it's more about giving recognition and praise and sharing things, and not about talking about disruptions. Take home folder. Yep, definitely. Those are important. And I think we help kids develop responsible habits, work home to school habits, when they have to bring a folder to and from school. And for me, that was where Class Dojo really helped, to help train those behaviors, with bringing them back and putting them in the room when they first got in the room. And that was really all I used Class Dojo for. Was I stood at the door, and if a folder landed in the box that by the door, they got their dojo. And we did that for the first couple of weeks of school until it was a learned behavior. And then I put dojo away. And so I think that became just like a habit for them. It's just, they didn't walk in the room unless they had that folder. So I'm going to add that to the presentation, because that's something I completely forgot about. Seesaw for everything, calling if teaching online. However, that became very overwhelming. Yeah, and I think that's another one that figuring out a balance with, those phone conversations are important, and we do get a lot out of them. But if you have 20 kids and every kid has one or two parents, that's a lot of phone calls. And obviously you wouldn't talk to all of them every day, and then, yeah, middle school, high school, those are multiple teachers. You have middle school and high school teachers have hundreds of kids that they take care of. That's a lot of phone calls. Series of other T's see value in having planners signed every day. My middle school, high school students don't even use paper planners. Is this an outmoded skill? Yeah, let's weigh in on that. That's an interesting conversation. What do we think about paper planners while we're training kids to manage their time and their assignments? Communication apps help while translating. I don't always have someone else that can for me, right? And that's one of the cool things about Remind, I think, is that it has that translation feature, and I think Seesaw does now too. And I know Google Translate offers some support in that way. I think planners are important, but maybe making a Google Keep note that they can use as a checklist. I love Google Keep. That's very cool. Yeah. Limiting a lot of paper passing due to the pandemic. Absolutely. I think I know a school that started out, they were going to do all paper because they felt like it met the needs of their community better. And after the first 2 weeks realized, for one, it wasn't sustainable. That was a lot of paper going home and having to get picked up. But then it was like teachers were thinking, I don't want to touch all this. I don't know where it's been. I can't give it back to them. It wasn't safe anymore. So for that reason alone, if we had to go back home again, or if we're doing this blended model of being home some days and at school other days, which I know a lot of schools here are thinking about, that could be something that we can't do. We did both paper and digital, and it was exhausting, I imagine. I know. Oh, you guys, you just went through so much. A Google form. Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think Google Keep is a really great idea too. I love Google Keep. I use it for shopping lists and to-do lists and all kinds of things. So I wonder how we could incorporate Google Keep with Seesaw, how that might work. I'm gonna have to play with that option for a little bit. So we've got some really great assessment or really great conversation happening here. I just have some closing thoughts for our final few minutes together, but keep those comments coming. I think at the heart of all communication are those strong relationships with parents. And so I always urge teachers to devote as much time at the beginning of the school year as they can to not just getting to know their kids, but their kids' parents as well. And that means that some more of that face-to-face contact or more of those phone calls, and building that relationship, because once they know you and trust you and like you, honestly, they're more likely to use whatever digital tool you want to use for communicating with them. It does take time to implement a communication plan. It's not, there are going to be some bumps along the way. There are going to be parents that don't know how to log in or don't have the right device, or phone gets dropped and lost and they get, they fall off the grid for a little bit. I think that's okay. There's just no perfect system. And feel free to alter it if it doesn't work. We love Seesaw. We think it's great, but there could be a family that it's just not working for them. And so coming up with alternatives might be the best thing to do. And I hear it, I say this a lot, and you probably know this in your heart, but it's easier said than done, having those healthy boundaries about communication. I think a lot of teachers during distance learning felt like they just had to be available all day, every day, always on, always responsive. And I think that's what was so exhausting, is that you didn't have the normal work day of, coming in at 8, leaving at 4, and maybe getting to shut down a little bit after that so you can tend to your own family. I think it's okay to be transparent with families and say, I'm available from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and this is how you can reach me, but I will not be checking messages or email after 5 p.m. I'm going to be with my family and focusing on my own time, on my me time. And I think if they know that, and obviously there are extenuating circumstances where maybe you check an email once in a while, but I think it's okay to set up those boundaries and to let people know when they can expect to see a response from you. And then consistency. It's important to be consistent, but you don't need to be perfect. So you may tell families that you're going to update a website on Friday and you may get sick and not be able to do it, or you might forget, and that's okay. You can just apologize and say, life got in the way and I'll be better next week. So I don't think there's a real strong need to have to be super perfect at this, because they're not going to be perfect on the other end either. I think it's just important to be transparent, and to do the best you can and to go in with the best intent, which is what you are always going to do. So, some great comments over here. We have, yep, the boundaries is a good idea. When I started online, they had some paper, and we'll have them take pictures of that way, and they need to be able to practice with pencil paper. I think that's the best thing about Seesaw, is that we can still do things with pencil and paper. We can still do things with Play-Doh. We can still make things with blocks and physical manipulatives. And then they just take a picture of it and share it. And then they'll clean it up and put it away even when we're in the classroom. And then we still have that documentation of what they did. And for mom and dad to see, and for us as teachers to see. So yeah, such a great tool for digital learning at every level. So that is my presentation today. If you have questions or other comments, please feel free to throw those in the chat box. I really appreciate everybody's interaction today, and giving all those great comments in the chat box and all the things you put on the Padlet and the slide deck. This slide deck is, you can add this to your drive if there are things you want to grab and share with your other colleagues that didn't come today. I really appreciate this conversation. I'm training students to take a clear picture of offline activities. It was a challenge. Lots of blurry pics. I actually had a whole series of lessons with the kids sort of an inquiry-based one where we talked about how to take good pictures and some of the things that we could do to take good pictures with an iPad, including, not covering the camera with our fingers and keeping things still. And I did it by sort of projecting some blurry pictures and projecting some pictures that weren't very good, and having the kids think about what went wrong in that picture and what would have made it better. And it's amazing. They're sponges. They can learn anything. And so just giving them a few pointers about how to get better pictures went a long way. And you can make it fun. So that's a great one. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I hope this was worth your time today. I hope you enjoyed the whole Mountain Moot Conference and that you'll enjoy the sessions today. I know Jamie Cassip has a keynote happening later today. So I think that we are finished with our work here. So thank you so much. Can I share the ideas in the chat box?
So the recording, we made a recording, and
Yeah.
it'll take a little while for the recording to finish, and I'll post it in the class. But the chat will be listed on the side, so everyone will be able to grab all the ideas that they saw.
Oh, good.
Running.
Thanks, Michael.
Yep.
I was gonna say, I guess I could download the chat transcript, but that's always really hard to read.
And I will actually try to download everything and share it with you through Google, and that way you can have a copy to give to other people yourself. But this recording should be up for at least for a little while, and the chat should be available there.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out to me with questions. There's my information there. And I don't know if you're in our Facebook group for Montana PBS, but that's a closed group just for teachers. And if you just look for MT PBS Teachers on Facebook, that's where we share all kinds of great things that are happening. And so it would be great to have you. And those of you in Billings, we hope to be having an Ed Camp pretty soon. We're doing one in Bozeman next month, just a very small, intimate event. But then we're hoping to get another one in Billings as things open back up again, because we definitely want to get together with you all in person. So thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to write down all these names so I can give Moot Coin.
And thank you, Nikki. That was a great presentation. And I'll go ahead and
thanks.
Stop.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for your help. I really appreciated having you moderate and having you help today.
You bet. Thank you.